Let's get our next speaker on. Who loves a podcast? Yeah, we like podcasts, yeah, okay. Do you prefer business podcasts or like personal podcasts? Who likes business or prefers business podcasts? Who likes like personal stuff? Yeah, good mix, okay. Who has a podcast? Oh, quite a few. That's a bit cool. Excellent. Well, our next speaker has a truly excellent podcast, and it's actually on the basis of listening to his podcast that I asked him to speak, because you need to go and listen to Agency Deal Masters podcast, particularly if you're part of an agency or growing one, or you're interested in listening to some of the brilliant minds that exist within our industry. Because I was blown away by the quality of the guests. And at dinner last night, I basically asked Nathan to tell me how he gets his guests. So, looking forward to that email that he's going to send me with the template. But more than the guests, I actually loved the way that the host, Nathan, asked questions and dived deeper into these conversations. I'm not a big fan of hearing podcasts where somebody gives an idea and then the host says, yeah, great, love that. There's not challenge. We need to challenge things. I want you to challenge the speakers today when you have conversations with them. Challenge yourself. That's how we will progress. So I absolutely thought, and still think that is brilliant. I'm looking forward to hearing what he's got to say to us today. So I want to welcome on stage Nathan Anibaba.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for having me. I'm Nathan Anibaba. As Paul said, I'm the founder of a company called Agency Deal Masters. By the way, amazing presentations from Amy and Sharon, by the way. Both of them, brilliant. Thanks, Amy, for giving me the permission to be weird, because I am weird in many, 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 many ways. British-born, African dad, Caribbean mom, lived in China, speak Chinese, speak Mandarin, traveled around the world, and I'm the definition of weird. So thank you for giving us the permission to do that. And I think also as well, to Sharon's point, I think this whole idea of like ageism and being afraid to be weird is all about our idea to kind of conform. We all want to conform and have this deep desire to conform. And I think it's probably a remnant of us being these evolved mammals that have been together in hunt together as societies for millions of years, right? Because millions of years ago, if you were weird, you were cast out of the village, and that was basically a death sentence, right? So you couldn't be weird. So you had to conform with everyone else. You had to be like everyone else. And I think, to a certain extent, as minorities, it's a huge issue in the black community, actually, that the fact that we're afraid to be different and step out and do things differently, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So thank you very much for those two talks. So I run a company called Agency Deal Masters, where we produce podcasts to help marketing agencies grow and win new business. I'll talk about that a little bit later. We call it growth podcasting. We also have a podcast ourselves, as Paul's mentioned, where every week I sit down and I interview leading marketeers from, leading agencies from, we've got some here, Mediacom, Havas, Ogilvy, brand side marketeers from BlackBerry, Google, Bain, just some amazing, amazing people. We've interviewed 140 of them now. We've been very busy over the last 2.5 years. It's been a very busy lockdown. And we've learned a thing or two about what it takes to become a really effective marketeer. So the good news for you is that you don't have to listen to 140 hours of podcasts, although I'd like you to still subscribe and listen and download and all the rest of it. But what we've done is we've distilled the best bits from 140 conversations, and we've come up with 10 ways that you can use to be a more effective marketeer. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're all ready, by the way, there are a ton of insights from speaking to these people. But I was saying to Paul at dinner yesterday that it's so weird having a show like this where you read, these people have sort of inspired me, and I've followed their work for years, and then suddenly you're speaking to people that have been your heroes, right? So it's really very humbling, and there are lots of things that we could have picked for today, but I feel these are the 10 most important things that I think all marketers should be aware of in order to become a more effective marketeer. So number one is core values, right? Core values should guide everything that you do. In fact, core values should guide all decision making. Who here knows, or who here can define what core values are? Like, just shout out, what do core values mean?
Fundamental to who you are.
Fundamental to who you are, yeah. Anything else?
Consistent messaging.
Yep. Yeah, consistent messaging, love that. Anything else?
They define what acceptable behavior is, what it looks like.
100%, definitely. All of those things are exactly sort of what I would define as core values. For me, I would define core values as rules to live by, right? So when you've got tough decisions to make in your business, everything from how do we treat this new client, how should we handle this problem team member, should we partner with this company or that company, what sort of people should we bring into the team, what sort of business opportunity should we take, all of these sorts of decisions should be guided by your core values, which ultimately are fundamental to kind of how you see the world and who you are and how you operate. We interviewed Nick Govia, who's the amazing founder of an amazing agency called Blurred London. She was on for episode 54 and learned so much about her. And we talked about the importance of core values and the core values that she's used to grow Blurred. She's won over 400 industry awards from Agency of the Year, Campaign of the Year, Best PR Agency in the world for the work they've done with M&S. And they've got clients like BT, Marriott, and Co. And she said that she won those clients in the first 6 months of actually starting the agency because she said her core values aligned with the core values of the brands that she spoke to. So they saw the world in the same sort of way, and it acted as this kind of attraction mechanism to attract sort of clients that operate and want to kind of see the world in the same sort of way as she does. We also interviewed Mike Payton, who is the co-author of a fantastic book called Get a Grip, which is a fable of traction. If any of you come over traction, it's the entrepreneurial operating system. Brilliant book. He talked about the importance of core values, and he said that core values should guide the kind of behavior that the entrepreneur wants, so that when the leader or the marketeer or the entrepreneur isn't around, the rest of the organization can make those tough decisions without having to be involved in every single decision, right? And we know how tough the last 18 months have been, and we know how unpredictable life is. And we can't always, as leaders, we can't always be at the center of decision-making to be guiding every single decision. We need to outsource those decisions to core values. So he says, when we need to make a tough hiring decision, what do our core values say? If we need to fire a client, what do our core values say? Core values are the guiding points and the North Star that's always driving you forward in the distance. For us, oops, sorry, let's go back. It's even more important when your core values are aligned around a higher purpose and a mission that the organization is on, right? Then you don't have to worry about things like motivation. How do we motivate employees? How do we incentivize employees to kind of bring their selves more to work and kind of give more to the cause? Because if everyone is rowing in the same direction, if everyone is aligned to the organization's goal and overarching purpose, then things like motivation and reward schemes are kind of, you'll throw them out of the window. So I can't tell you how many of the leaders that we've spoken to cite core values and the use of core values as like a core guiding principle for who they are and how they operate. Number 2, develop range. Bill Bernbach, legendary ad man, once said, creativity is all about how obscure your references are. So if someone doesn't know that you've referenced this idea of a campaign from an obscure 1970s Polish film, then they'll assume that you're the second coming of David Ogilvy and like a really amazing creative, right? So the whole idea, and going back to Amy's point about being weird, is we can't all watch the same episodes of Love Island, right? And think that we're going to be creative. We need to read books that people don't read and watch movies that people don't watch and travel places that people don't normally go to be able to sort of use those different reference points to come up with really creative solutions to problems that have stumped people in our industry for a very long time. So that's that whole idea of range, I'll talk about a little bit later. Wale Oyenkami, amazing guy. He's a founder of an amazing agency in France called Darewin, founder and CEO of Darewin. He exemplifies this whole idea of range, right? And pooling from different sources to be able to be, really creative. So he at 22, so just a little bit of background on Darewin. They've got clients like Netflix and Spotify. They're absolutely crushing it right now in France in the entertainment space. And at 22, he got his first job in video production, working with a really well-known French TV production company, Canal Plus, and worked his way up, did really, really well, worked his way up, got a really amazing salary package, benefits, and then did something really crazy. He decided to quit and start as a junior intern within a social media marketing agency, a digital marketing agency, with a focus on performance. All of his friends and family were like, dude, you are crazy. Like, what the hell are you doing? Like, you're doing really well, you're absolutely crushing it. Why would you start from the bottom within a completely different agency? But he knew that if he was to combine the skills and experiences that he's learned in high production value, TV, storytelling, and combining that with the emerging field of social and digital and performance, if he combined those two skills at the time, he would make himself really valuable, so that when briefs started coming into the agency that the agency couldn't fulfill, he knew that he was primed to fulfill that brief. That's when he started Darewin, and the rest was history, right? He's been on this amazing journey. This is backed up by an amazing book called Range by David Epstein, I highly recommend that you all pick up this book, by the way. He interviewed leading scientists, sports people, entrepreneurs, technicians in all areas of life, and found that the most creative, the ones with the most fulfilling careers, and the ones who were able to be the most successful were the ones that had this like diverse range of experiences throughout their lives. So they were able to, they read widely, they traveled, they had lots of different careers. They quit jobs regularly to start do random things. And they were able to pool all of those experiences into, bring novel kind of models and ways of working from a completely different field into the field that they ultimately sort of stayed in to create really interesting and novel innovations. And I guess the thinking for a long period of time is that you have to be a specialist. You have to be a specialist in one lane and do one thing well. He talks in the book about the fact that there's a surgeon for your right ear. So there are specialists that are right ear surgeons, and there are specialists that are left ear surgeons. And that's all that they do. They specialize in, so if you have a problem with your right ear, there are surgeons that you go to. But what they found was that people in completely different fields were able to come up with new solutions to problems that had stumped right ear surgeons for many, many years, because they just took mental models and ways of operating into different fields. And especially when it comes to complex fields like marketing, right? We're all, we have to understand deep human behavior and why people do what they do. So it's massively complex. So the more that we're able to pull from different sources, the more successful we'll be able to be. D&I is your superpower, number 3. So Perrine Fark is just a powerhouse, by the way. She's phenomenal. She's the author of an amazing book called Inclusion, The Ultimate Power to Your Organization's Success. And you're probably thinking, the ultimate power to your organization's success, really? The ultimate? What about things like strategic thinking and decision making and risk taking and M&A and like all those other things that are in business, right? What about all these other things? D&I and inclusion is the most important superpower. And actually, if you look at the research done by Harvard Business Review, McKinsey, and Bain, they all back up the fact that the more inclusive your organization is, the more diverse your organization is, the more creative you are, and the more revenue you're able to generate from those innovations, right? And from that creativity. We also know that when employees feel listened to, when they feel heard, when they feel understood, they give more to the cause, they're more motivated. So again, you don't have to, we know how expensive it is to replace employees that aren't happy. So when we listen to employees, when we make them feel included, they bring more effort and energy to our cause and actually help us in ways that we underestimate. Our purpose as an agency is to make everyone feel like they belong, everyone. And our mission, i.e. our guiding star, the way that we will get there, the hill that we're climbing right now, is to build the world's most inclusive agency. Because we feel that if we build an agency that is profitable, that is successful, that is famous because of its inclusion, the penny will drop and other agencies and other businesses will follow suit, right? We don't want to be the agency that's pointing fingers at people, telling them that they need to change. We want to be the change that we want to see within the industry. Number 4, think long term. Too many of us, too many marketers think short term, right? We think bottom of the funnel, conversion, CRO, ABM, all of these things at the bottom of the funnel to convert people now, get them to buy, get them to give you money right now. But we know this intuitively, and we also know it from data, that the best way to convert people at the bottom of the funnel is to build the top of the funnel first, right? We need to build a brand. And by building brand, you actually, you don't need to convert people at the bottom of the funnel because they'll beat a path to your door. They'll come to you. And often they'll be willing to pay more for that premium. They'll pay a premium for it because you've built that brand. But brand takes time, and you can't measure it on a spreadsheet all the time, so it's not easy to measure. But we know that the long-term benefits of building a brand are to help you at the bottom of the funnel. We interviewed David Hyatt for episode 49 of the podcast. Phenomenal guy, co-founder of Hyatt Dennett. Read his books, subscribe to his newsletter, just follow everything that David Hyatt does. Phenomenal. I'm seeing some heads nodding. Phenomenal guy. We talked about the importance for everyone, marketeers and business people alike, to kind of increase their time horizons, right? We know that the strongest tree in the forest is the oak tree, right? Why is it the strongest tree in the forest? Because before it spends time growing, it buries its roots deep into the ground for a very long time. So when it starts growing, if there's a strong wind that blows or a tornado or a pandemic, right? It's able to withstand the pandemic because of its strong roots. But it takes a long time to do that, as opposed to the bamboo shoot that grows really fast, but then falls down at the slightest strong wind, right? And there's so much money at the moment being thrown at young tech investors to grow the next Facebook or the next Instagram or the next billion-dollar scale-up. And what's the rush? Like, why are we doing this? Like, it's absolutely crazy. It's almost like, we're doing this so that if you look at the front cover of Inc., Forbes, all of these business magazines, they put the cool, young, hot startup founder on the front cover as the example of what entrepreneurship is and what it should be. But actually, we know that to build sustainable businesses over the long term, it takes 20, 30, 40, 50 years. It takes a long time to be able to do that. And we need to be able to, because it's the rigor and it's the challenges that we've overcome over such a long period of time that makes us strong. Those tech founders on the front cover of those magazines are the exception and not the rule. Increase your time horizon. Number 5, we've heard this a couple of times today, but keep mentally and physically fit. I can't tell you how many of the sort of marketing leaders that we've spoken to on the show prioritize their health and fitness, which means they eat well, they sleep 8, 9 hours, 7, 8, 9 hours, depending on kind of, what your body says. Why We Sleep is a fantastic book. And they exercise. They exercise regularly, right? Because they know that in order to operate at peak performance and in order to deliver, both in their personal lives and in their professional lives, their number one metric that they need to optimize is their energy, right? So if they don't optimize their energy, then they're not able to kind of bring the energy and the enthusiasm that they need to kind of operate at a really high level for their organizations and for their families. Mike Payton, who we just talked about, who wrote the book Get a Grip, he's in his 70s, and he recently had a hip operation. And he was telling me that he still finds workarounds, he still finds time to exercise 4 or 5 times a week, despite just coming out of hospital, because he knows that if he's not able to have really high energy, then he's not able to achieve everything else that he wants in his life. That's a key takeaway from the podcast. Number 6, study behavioral science. Everyone here knows what behavioral science is, and behavioral economics has been mentioned a few times. How many of us study it on a regular basis? What is behavioral science? Can anyone shout out some definitions? What is it? Yeah, perfect. Yeah, the study of how people is a study. You got it in one. The study of how people actually behave in real world, as opposed to like a fictional laboratory or on a spreadsheet somewhere that's measured by. And what do we know about how people actually behave? Well, we know that we're like this sack of emotions. We're just these emotional sacks that make decisions emotionally and then rationally justify all of those decisions, right? And it's especially, and I feel as though marketers, we fail to understand that, or at least execute on that. I think we understand it intuitively, but we don't bring it into our comms, or we don't bring it into our work as often as we necessarily should. And we know this, right? Because Shakespeare's written about this stuff. Fear, jealousy, love, hate, all of these things are enduring human emotions. The Greeks wrote about this thousands of years ago. We're all these sacks of emotions. And it's especially true in really complex, expensive B2B decisions, right? When we think that, if the CMO is hiring a new agency or buying a new piece of software, it's a tremendously emotional decision, right? Because there's so much more riding on it. It's like, what do people think of me if it goes wrong? My career's on the line. These are all sort of emotional decisions that we fail to sort of implement into our comms as often as we necessarily should. We know that the System 1 brain, if we've read, if we've learned anything from Daniel Kahneman and all the behavioral scientists, that the System 1 brain, or the chimp brain, or the lizard brain, whatever people call it, has been with us for millions and millions of years, and that's the thing that drives us. But the thing that we kind of, when we wear our suits and ties and show up in the office, the way that we justify those decisions is based on our System 2 brain, but we need to speak more to our System 1. We had Rory Sutherland on the show for episode 45, 47, and 50. Not 3 times, it was like a 2-hour conversation, so we had to break it down into 3 parts. He goes a million miles a minute. But he's just an absolute genius, Rory Sutherland. And obviously, he wrote the book Alchemy, The Surprising Power of Ideas That Don't Make Sense. And he said, one of the interesting things that he said many interesting things, but one of the interesting things that he said is that if you were going to come up with an idea to rival Coke, a new soft drink brand, and we're all sitting around the table here, and you were the one that said, you know what, let's make this drinks brand really expensive, let's put less in the can and let's make it taste really, really bad. You'd be laughed out of the room. But that's what Red Bull's done. And they're making enough to send people to the moon, right? And fund a Formula One sports team. So it's this whole idea of, that's alchemy, that's magic, that's the magic of marketing. And just as I was kind of preparing my talk for this morning, I was looking at doing some bedtime reading on LinkedIn. And I saw a post that he published actually just last night, and he said, if we all use logic, if all business people use logic to arrive at a certain destination, then we're all going to arrive at the same place. We're all going to arrive at the same place, right? But if we use magic, if we use emotions, then we arrive in very different places. I know, Amy, you don't like the word reimagine. I know that, and I was like, damn it, I need to adjust my slides. But hear me out. I have a slightly different take on this. So Ozioma Ngozi is just a phenomenal woman. She is my personal sort of guru, TEDx speaker, transformational leader. She mentors Fortune 500 CEOs. She's a diversity and inclusion evangelist, just a phenomenal, phenomenal person. She hasn't been on the podcast yet, but she's coming on. We'll keep trying, put it that way. And we've spoken, it's in the pipeline. And she talks about this whole idea of the pandemic being a portal, right? And that 2019 and the years before that, we were all comfortable going to the office 5 days a week and traveling 2 hours to the office and 2 hours back and only living for the weekend. And that was fine. But then we've gone through this portal, and then we're here in 2021, and we're like, actually, why do we need to go into the office 5 days a week again? And why do we need to hire in the way that we do? And why do we need to buy in the way that we do? And why do we need to do all of these things that we used to do in that way? It's totally, it's been 2 years since the start of the pandemic, right? 2 years. And that's enough time for human behavior to completely change, for us to adopt new habits and new behaviors and actually make them really quite entrenched. So I don't think we're ever going to go back to the way that things were in the before times in 2019. So I think people are more open to radical new ideas and new ways of thinking, and your customers and employees and your bosses are all open to new ways of operating in this world. And I think we all need to take the opportunity now, more so than ever, to reimagine everything. Number 8 is listen. Buddha once said, and we didn't have Buddha on the podcast, by the way, just in case you're asking. We didn't, busy. Buddha once said that if you're talking, then you're not learning. And Calvin Coolidge once said, no man ever listened his way out of a job. Why don't we listen to each other? It's a rhetorical question. Sorry, we are self-important. It's true, we are. When I'm talking, I'm the center of attention. I'm speaking. Thank you very much. I don't need to listen to anything that I don't want to hear. I don't have to learn anything that I don't want to be exposed to. I can bolster my own identity. But there's another reason why we don't listen. It takes too long. We can listen. Human beings can talk at 225 words a minute, but we can listen at 500 words a minute. So that means we're tuning out. We're making up the other 277 words, right? And what are we telling ourselves when we make up those other words? Well, essentially, we're not learning from each other. And I think part of the reason why we have such a divisive culture, and the reasons why our politics and our business is so divisive, is because we're not listening to each other. We don't. That's especially true in marketing, right? We need to listen to our customers far more. We need to listen to our employees. We need to listen to our bosses. We need to stop talking as much and trying to be the center of attention, and actually be open to ideas from the outside world. And that goes back to our whole idea of range and being willing to be impacted by the world and diversity and diverse thoughts and opinions from all over the place. Stephen Covey once said that most people don't listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. And we're all guilty to a certain extent of operating in that way. Number 9, think big. We had Brent Adamson on the show, the VP of Gartner, and also just a phenomenal guy. He wrote the Challenger Sale book, the Challenger Customer. Phenomenal guy, really humble, down to earth, great conversation. He was on for episode 39 and 73. Go check those out. I'll leave a link to it towards the end. But we asked our guests the same questions all the time, and we asked him, hey, what's your one piece of advice that you would give to every marketeer out there who wants to develop a similar sort of career and have the same sort of success that you've had? And he said, what did he say? He said, take big swings. Take big swings. I'm going to try and do a baseball analogy. But, knock it out of the park. I'm going to anglicize it. Knock it out of the park. Like, we're only here once, in my opinion. And so why are we punting? Why punt? And punt, if no one plays, I don't play baseball. But punting is when the ball is coming at you, you don't knock it, you don't go to hit a home run, you kind of just hit it and you just, so you get the idea. Why punt? Like, it takes just as much energy to think of big ideas and big impacts than it does to think of small ideas and small impact. And you attract so much more energy and enthusiasm and excitement to you when you think of big transformational ideas that can have a huge impact on people. It takes just as much energy, as we said earlier. Episode 13 of the podcast was with Ben Fox, who's the founder of Fox Agency. Guess which one Ben Fox is? He's amazing guy. So we interviewed him for episode 13. I was super nervous at that stage because I had no idea what I was doing when it came to podcasting. And his episode was called Think Big. And at that time, they were probably 13 people, agency in Leeds, and had a handful of clients in lots of different sectors. And he said that their goal, they will be one of the biggest, most successful B2B tech marketing agencies in the next 3 to 5 years. And in my head, listen, I wanted to be supportive, but in my head, I was thinking, and he said also that he would beat Ogilvy and Transmission, huge agencies, to global B2B pitches, for clients. And I loved the ambition and I loved his goal, but I was thinking in my head that this isn't really realistic, really. In the next 3 to 5 years, you're going to be beating Ogilvy consistently and become one of the biggest B2B agencies in the world. But fast forward 3 years, and they're now 60 people. They have some of the biggest B2B tech clients in the world. They have beaten Ogilvy several times, actually, to really prestigious client wins. And they are definitely established as one of the most successful B2B tech agencies around today. But he had the goal, and he was so definitive and he was so matter-of-fact about this was going to be his big goal. And he's essentially brought that into fruition. We have helped him on the journey. So as I said earlier, we help agencies grow by producing podcasts which help them attract and win new clients. So part of what we've helped them to do is to actually interview and bring on to the show their ideal target clients, right? So people like BlackBerry and people like Google, we've interviewed them on their show. We created this new show called Client Side for them, where we interview senior brand side marketeers and ultimately repurpose that content into webinars and ebooks and white papers and thought pieces to be able to help them build their brand and establish them as thought leaders, but also at the same time build a relationship with the prospects and customers that they really want to work with and speak to. And it's been tremendously successful to help them win work with those senior B2B brands that they want to work with. So, number 9 is knock it out of the park. Think big. Number 10, last but not least, subscribe to the podcast. If you want to be a more effective marketeer, subscribe to Agency Deal Masters podcast, and we've done all the hard work for you here. You can subscribe on Spotify, go to agencydealmasters-marketed.live mentions, and become a more effective marketeer. Thank you.